Welcome to a Squared Conversation, where I'll be having discussions with impactors and community drivers in the Philadelphia running and fitness scene, who inspire all of us to show up for our community authentically. I'm your host, Aaron Nixon. Join me and a special guest each episode as we dive into the who we are, why we show up every day for those around us, unpacking beyond the surface conversation by welcoming vulnerability, love, and grace. Hey everyone, welcome back to A Squared Conversation. I'm your host, Aaron Nixon, and today I have the immense pleasure of sitting down with someone who we all know and love in our community. His name is Michael Gagliardi, but we all know him as Gagz. Certified ultra running coach, podcaster, known for his legendary Philly Four Corners run, his epic Benjamin Franklin Bridge runs, also known as the Benny 500. Everyone, please welcome Gagz. Hey Gagz, welcome in, buddy.
Appreciate you having me in. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. It's so surreal and it's very full circle because you had me on your podcast.
Yeah.
And what was that? 2022?
23?
Yeah.
22.
Yeah.
23?
2023.
22.
2023. The mirror was unveiled in 2022.
Oh,
so we did the podcast in 2023.
There you go.
Dude, that was amazing. That was really amazing.
So things have come full circle and I feel like we was meant to be here now.
Exactly. I'm like, that intro itself just needs to be unpacked because when we were both working at Philly Runner before I joined, you had mentioned to me that you wanted to be an ultra running coach.
Yes.
And you were like, yeah, I'm going to be starting like the classes and the courses pretty soon. And now to sit here and introduce you and you have it, dude, that's amazing.
That wasn't lost on me either. Thank you for that. That's been a very rewarding process. It allows me to just be a part of my community in a whole different manner. And the thing I think when I think about coaching, man, it's like you can go online and you can Google 100-miler training plan and you'll get a plan, right? So it's like, why would someone seek out a coach? Like, what are they looking for? And perhaps it's accountability, but I think also like I'm given a piece of myself, and I keep my roster at a manageable level. I'm not trying to scale up and make this my full-time job. I'm really into like connecting with athletes, helping them achieve their goals, answering all their questions. That makes me super happy.
Yeah.
So it's nice and like I'm never going to drive a Ferrari down Broadway. Like that's not my motivation here. So it's a nice way for me to give back and be a part of my community.
Yeah. And dude, and you lead with so much love, man. It's really, really nice to see that because people come in, they know who you are. And even when you're taking on these clients, these runners, it's like, okay, this is the plan, but also like,
yeah, it's a little weird sometimes when someone comes in the store and it's flattering, it's humbling and flattering when someone comes in the store and then it'll even happen where like, they'll hear me talking to someone else and be like, I recognize that voice. I heard you on, I was like, that's me, or aren't you? Yeah, that's me. I'm the dude.
Yeah.
So it's a little, it's humbling.
But you got to think you are really kind of setting the tone for people in like their fitness or kind of like running trajectory, right? Especially for someone who may just beginning or they really are trying to do ultras. Like you talk about being a coach, you are impacting someone's life. I say like, taking so many fitness classes, whether it's Orange Theory, F45, the coach or their instructor really makes the class. Like if they don't have that energy, I'm going to want to like walk out the door. Yeah.
I appreciate that because I really do try to give a piece of myself. And that's why I keep my roster manageable because there's only so much of me to give in a true, authentic, genuine way.
Yeah.
So like you said, kind of leading with love, you can't spread yourself too thin. So I have it at a very manageable level.
Dude, well, you do a great job. I mean,
thank you.
The first time I met you was at a queer run.
Yeah.
And you were just like shuffling, but even like just inviting. Yeah, I was like, who is this dude? Like I had heard of you and I was like, okay, he's a little intimidating. It was just like the look, like the tattoos, like the beard.
Dude, I'm such a teddy bear, man.
Yeah,
Don't let this gruff exterior fool you.
Yeah. So once I get to know you, like once anyone gets to know you, dude.
And my classic shuffle stride, for the folks at home who don't know what a shuffle stride is, like if you see me run, I have these little hummingbird legs. It's just kind of like, and I'll take these long leaps like a gazelle.
Yeah.
I just kind of shuffle around. I got a gray beard. I'm no one to be intimidated by.
Yeah. Did you adopt that along the course of like your running, or is that something that you do to kind of like maintain energy while you're?
Bro, that's been my natural stride before I even knew what ultras was or were rather. That's always been my natural stride. I've never really monkeyed around with it too much because there's no need for me to.
Yeah.
And I think like I have a very economical, efficient stride. So I don't put a lot of unwarranted pressure or impact on my joints when I land. It's really served me well. It's not always the coolest looking stride, but it's certainly efficient and definitely gets the job done. With that being said, it also makes me somewhat of a clumsy trail runner. Like I'm not the greatest trail runner. I do trail races and I get them done, but that's not my bread and butter.
Okay, got it. Yeah. And I've tried to implement that same shuffle along my runs too. And I will always say it has kind of like reserved a little bit of energy.
Sure.
For sure. Like even along my long runs, dude. Like if I start to do that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to just think like Gagz right now. I'm going to run like Gagz. And I'm like, okay. Seriously, I'm like, what would Gagz do? Just do the shuffle.
WWGD.
Shuffle. Exactly. You heard it here, everyone. WWGD. Well, speaking of the shuffle and also just kind of like community and being a big teddy bear inside, let's talk about last year's, briefly, the Halloween Spooky Scramble with Philly Runner, when so many people showed up as you, like in costume.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Dude, that was incredible. I was like, talk about impact and being a coach. You were the coach for costumes that day too.
So this has been going on. I've had the beard now for well over a decade.
Yeah.
So every year without fail, people have dressed up as me for Halloween, and it's hilarious to me. This year there's a woman in particular who dressed up, and she took the time to stalk my Instagram page, BDG123, just to kind of stalk my Instagram page and like get my tattoos down. She had the knuckle tat, she had the Rocky tat, she had my kids' names on her arms, like wrote on her shoes the way that I do. It blew me away. It's like, it's funny to me. But at the same time, like, I don't take myself very seriously. Don't get it twisted, so I have a sense of humor, but it's flattering, it's humbling, and it's funny.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And, I've attended Spooky Scrambles in the past, but that was the first time where, like, you attended it. And I was like, wait, where's Gagz? And they were like, he's over there. I was like, wait, no, that's not him. Dude, that was just so much funny. But it just goes to show, like, the power of, like, how you're showing up for the community and your impact and, like, your influence,
I try. Thank you.
Would you call yourself an influencer?
Man, that's such a tricky word because I don't do this for the kudos or the likes. I think if anything, if you wanted to label me as something, I think my sons would call me a micro influencer, on a very acute level, especially in the Philadelphia community. If you want to call me an influencer, I'm not going to argue with that. I think when you start looking at, the broader definition of what an influencer is and the reach that they have, I don't necessarily have that, nor am I seeking to get that. I'm sure we're going to talk more later on about this too, but I'm not in this for the kudos or the likes or anything else like that.
Yeah, absolutely, dude.
So I kind of like, I'll accept that term on a local, on a local level.
Yeah, on a local scale.
Begrudgingly, I'll accept it.
Yeah. It's funny because I was telling you earlier before we actually sat down that I was listening to the episode on your podcast, actually, with Kellen Matthews and Cass Matthews. And Cass Matthews used the term impactor, instead of being called an influencer. Right. And I would say the same for you, being an impactor more so.
I won't argue with that one.
Yeah. 100%.
I'll do an impactor. But they're both an example of like influencers, not just on a local level, but on a much broader scale too. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's cool for them. It's just not me.
Yeah. I resonate with that. So dude, how did you start running, and what was like the shift to ultras for you? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. I guess the easiest way to say it is, after I got married, when you get married, you have kids, you kind of slow down a little bit, you kind of settle into this lethargy, shall we say. And, I was still drinking a lot then, just really not living my best life. And I remember my wife at the time came home, and she's like, well, this was May of 2011. And I had a previous health scare about a year before, where I had started to lose a little bit of weight, but at my heaviest, man, I was like 242 pounds, like at the cusp of shopping at the big and tall store. So it's like, I just wasn't living a good life. And my wife comes home at the time, and she's like, well, I signed us up for the YMCA family plan.
Yeah.
And I'm like, gosh, shit. I'm like, I know what she's trying to say.
Yeah. You're like, what?
She's like, I ain't married this dude,
Yeah.
like, what is this? And I'm not always the best with change. It might take me a second to change or to adopt change in my life. And I put up a little protest. I was like, babe, I was like, how I'm wired. And she's like, just stop me. She's like, it's better than what you've been fucking doing. And I was like, all right, done. So I walked into the YMCA May of 2011, like a wad of cookie dough, man. And did the little circuit workout, started doing like warm-ups, cool downs on the treadmill. I was real big into like the Les Mills body combat, body pump classes. I'd sit on the spin bike for an hour. I used to love that. But I found myself shirking away from the circuits and the weights and kind of spending more time on the treadmill, warm-ups and cool downs. And I'd be like, oh, wow, I wonder what I could do, but I still wasn't running outside yet. That was like a whole nother mountain that I hadn't even come to yet.
Yeah.
It was just getting in the habit of like developing some kind of routine. And then it became like, all right, I'm not going to have a cheeseburger for lunch. Or maybe I am, but I'm going to have a piece of Swiss on there, And then it's like, well, I could do a side salad with my burger. Now I'm going to have a turkey burger with Swiss and avocado and a side salad. Then I'm going to do a veggie burger, and then I'm going to move into like juices. And it was like a gradual thing over time. So, April of 2012, my brother comes over to the house and he's like, hey man, there's this 10K, the Merrill Down and Dirty 10K obstacle mud run. Like we're all signing up for it. You should sign up too. And I was like, okay. I signed up for it and I trained for that thing as though I was in the fucking Olympics, man. It was like, it was all consuming. I would go to bed early on a Friday night. I wouldn't meet my friends for a drink because I had to run 4 miles the next day. Like, I remember having a bowl of pasta. I was carb loading, all that, all those things you do. And, I finished that race and it's funny, man. When I ran that race, we all started together. This was July 12th, 2012 or July 15th, 2012. We all started that race together. There was like 6 of us and I didn't see them again. I just thought I was ahead of them the whole time. And I was saying to myself like, oh man, like this was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I trained so hard for this. I'm going to beat all these guys. And all these guys were like runners. Like they had done half marathons and stuff. And they'd done a couple like sprint triathlons. So to me, they were on Mount Olympus, man.
Yeah.
So I remember crossing the finish line like an hour and 25 or something for the obstacle 10K. And I thought I smoked these guys, but here they were waiting for me at the finish line. They finished by about 20 minutes before I did. And like, I am competitive, very much so, but I was wise enough to be like, it doesn't matter. Like you finished, you feel really good. And I was like, what else is out there, dude? And I was off to the races.
Yeah.
I think the next year, 2013, I ran my first half. I ran my first Philly full marathon. I've run the Philly marathon every year since 2013.
Ooh, let's go, Gagz.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
The last couple of years, I've had the privilege to work with an organization called Ansley's Angels, who push adults and children who are confined in a wheelchair. It's a way for like inclusivity and just for these folks to be included in the race. And it's a nice way for me to give back. Frankly, I don't really care about my marathon times at all. So it's not like, I'm giving up a chance to go run Boston or some horse shit like that. To me, it's just a nice chance for me to end my season, give back to my community and spend time in like my city, high fiving everyone I know as they line the course. It's a wonderful way to give back.
Yeah.
So 2013, I ran the marathon and then 2014, actually, when I finished the Philly marathon, the day after I finished that, I still couldn't walk down the steps or up steps or anything like that. And my brother, again, it was my brother, Frankie. He comes over and he's like, hey, man, congrats, this and that. And he's like, I think you should sign up for an Ironman. I'm like, what?
Ooh.
And he's like, yeah, he's like an Ironman distance triathlon. I was like, bro, I can't even I don't have a bike. I said, I can doggy paddle. I said, I can, if you put me in a 12-foot pool, I can doggy paddle and get to the wall, but I can't swim.
Yeah.
It's like, well, take lessons. He's like, you belong to the Y, take lessons. And I was like, all right. So drunk with hubris from my first, from my first marathon, I signed up for this Ironman distance triathlon. And for the next 7 months, I borrowed a bike from somebody. I took swim lessons and I really just made that my life.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily fall in love with the triathlete world or that community per se. I'll let that be. But what I did fall in love with was the schedule. I had a plan for 7 months. I knew what I was doing. I could look at a calendar and be like, 4 months from now, I have to do a brick workout where I'm going to ride my bike for 80 miles, and then I'm going to go run a 20-mile run.
That discipline. Yeah.
And it was like, that's what I loved. You know, I didn't know about ultras when I was training for my first and only Ironman distance triathlon. For the folks at home, Ironman distance triathlon is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and then a full road marathon, 26.2 miles at the end. So 140.6 is the mileage. I didn't know anything about ultras at that time. I was just really hooked on this like training. And, as I'm getting deeper and deeper into this, like, people, places, and things, when you eliminate certain things from your lifestyle, people, places, and things, you avoid triggers and people, places, and things. And I started to see, like, I wouldn't see my old crowd of friends near as much as I used to. Some of my relationships at work kind of fell by the wayside. I was no longer like organizing happy hours or what I used to call gentlemen's dinners. Yeah. We'd get the crew together, and have these gentleman dinners with a nice cocktail and just have a nice meal. And like, I started to shy away from those kinds of things and really just devote myself to goals. Yeah. And, when I finished that, I would cross the finish line with my family. It was a wonderful experience. Yeah. And I was like, well, what else is out there? Yeah. And I had briefly tried to train for like a speed workout for Boston, but Boston's never been my thing, man. And, I had learned about ultras shortly thereafter. And, 2014, I did the Ironman, June 29th, 2014. Then I ran the Bucky Challenge in Bucks County. It was a half marathon, full marathon, Saturday and Sunday. I believe I took 3rd place for that. The following week was the Philly Marathon. And then 2 weeks later, I had ran my first 50K, the Rocky 50K, hosted by Rebecca Barber here in the city of Philadelphia. And it basically traces the route that Rocky would have run in Rocky 2 if that was a real training run. It's a 31-mile run or a 50K. And, I had done that run and I met some people there who've been, one woman in particular, Mary Arnold. She's been very influential in my life since then. And I didn't realize what a mover and shaker she was in this industry when I met her. She was just so humble. She's talking to me about 100-mile races and I'm like, whoa, yeah, that's a thing, and like what's nuts about that too was like, I had while we were running, there was about 6 of us in this pack and I only knew one person at this event prior to me showing up. And like, we fall in this little pack of like 6 runners. It was, temperatures were in the high. It's always the first Saturday of December. And that particular day, it was like, the temperatures were in the high 30s. It was that sideways Scottish rain, super cold. And I was so happy, I'm having these conversations with runners. And I'm like, it was the first time that I can recall, not only in my adult life, but probably in my entire life, where I truly felt like, damn, I think I just like found my tribe. I found my people. And I'd never experienced that before. And I had the wherewithal in the moment to understand and recognize what it was that was happening to me. And it was transformative at the moment. And when I got done, Mary gave me her information. She's like, please reach out if you have any questions. And she gave me a couple like places to start looking. And that was it, man. Yeah. Like, I never looked back. I mean, I mentioned that before after my first 10K, but this was it. Like, I found what I'm supposed to be doing. And, I signed up for the Dirty German 50 miler May of 2015. And to date, I've done 50 something ultras. I finished every single one of them. Yeah. 0 DNFs, meaning I did not finish. I've done 23 races of 100 miles or greater. 18 of those have been sub 24-hour finishes. So it's very much the center. Like, this type of running is very much at the center of my life. Yeah. Yeah. And it all started from that Rocky 50K back in 2014.
That's incredible. I just want to go ahead and take a moment to just give you like a clap because that's
engineers are clapping. Thank you.
Yeah, let's give them a clap because that's incredible. Like, you just listed off so many accomplishments, racing, the Ironman, dude, like, That's incredible. That's a powerful resume. When you look back, sitting here and now just thinking about all the things that you have accomplished running wise.
The memories of a man in his old age, or the memories or the deeds of a man in his prime. That was said by
that's a good one. Yeah.
Pink Floyd.
Okay.
From their song Free For. But I'm not resting on my laurels either. Like I've been very fortunate, man. Knock on wood. I've only had one serious injury throughout my running career and mentors along the way. So I've had good crew along the way, and no one gets where they're going alone. But I don't necessarily, like when it's done and I put it in my rear view mirror, after I process whatever I've done, I put it in my rear view mirror and I keep moving forward. You know, I've been lucky in the sense that I got the course records and podiums and victories and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, man, it's really about me against me.
Yeah.
You know, it's not so much, I mean, don't get it twisted, guys. Like I'm competitive. When I show up to a timed event, that's my bread and butter. Like I don't care who's out there. Like I'm coming, if I'm not going to win, I'm going to keep first place. I'm keeping fucking honest, and I'm going to make them work hard. Period. End of discussion. You know,
you heard it here, guys.
But I also recognize that it's me against me.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what, when I was doing that ultra at the Rocky 50K and I started like meeting people and talking to people and I'm listening to them talk, and I really just, I've always been a little bit of an oddball, man, my whole life. It's just always been that way. I've never always been the most conventional person, shall we say. And it's not anything I'm doing on purpose. I'm not putting on airs. It's just kind of me and how I'm wired. And I found that in this sport, in that community in particular, there's a lot of people who are wired like me. You know, they might tend to, and it's a double-edged sword, man. The things that allow me to be quote unquote successful, you know, at these types of distances is a double-edged sword. You know, you have to, I've got some discipline, I've got motivation, but that also means you got to trim the fat in your life. You got to cut things out. You know, you got to cut people, places, and things out of your life because they're no longer serving you and your purpose and your goals.
Yeah.
You know, and I found that in this community, there's a lot of people who are wired like me. Maybe they have substance abuse issues in their past, or they've, whatever it is, man. But like when I was drinking, Aaron, I was always the last one. Always. And I took pride in that too, man. Like, that was my thing. I could keep going, keep drinking. I drank myself sober numerous times, man. Like that's a tough thing to do. Yeah,
like that high tolerance. You're like, okay, I'm good.
But to drink yourself sober, or at least think you're sober again, like yeah.
What is that process like? You know, especially because I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, your wife at the time coming to you and being like, hey, like we are going to be at the YMCA, you know, that Ironman. It sounds like those two moments were like the catalyst.
They were seminal.
They
were seminal moments. Like, I mean, the Ironman, in a sense, the Ironman distance triathlon, that challenge triathlon in Atlantic City, you'll never hear me refer to myself as a triathlete ever. But it was seminal in the sense that it taught me, because I remember ABC Wide World of Sports. This is how I'm fucking dating myself. Like, in the mid 80s, there was this program on Channel 6. It would come on Saturday afternoons at 4:00, Channel 6, and it was called the Worldwide World of Sports. And I remember clear as day, they had the Kona in Hawaii, the Ironman was the first one they ever had. And I remember like watching it as a kid, and like the guy who crossed the finish line, his legs were all wobbly. And it stuck with me, you know? So fast forward, God knows how many years later, I'm training for this thing, and I'm in the basement of my house every Friday night with, like, my brother lent me the Iron Man documentary series, like a 10 DVD disc thing, and I'd be down there for hours on a Friday night, spinning nowhere, watching this and just envisioning myself being a finisher, you know, and I was like, and that's honestly, man, that's when I grew my beard out again. I had one when I was younger, but that's when it started, because I kept a close beard for a little bit in my old life, whatever. I was always like, I don't want people to think whatever about me. And then I started training, but I always wanted to grow my beard out. You know, it's just, and I told myself, like, if I can do this, if I can train my body to do this, these 140.6 miles, no one's ever going to tell me again what I can and can't do with my facial hair, of all things. Go fuck yourself. You know, and it was just like So the Ironman distance triathlon in and of itself was awesome, but that wasn't, it was the training.
Yeah.
It's like that cliche expression, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah.
And I was teaching myself that through hard work, discipline, motivation, surrounding yourself with the right people, working hard when no one's watching you. I got people in my life who I respect, who I look up to, and I'm trying to earn the respect all the time. Like, that's when those kinds of things started popping in my mind. That was the seminal moment. That was the change.
Yeah.
Crossing the finish line with my family, with my two sons, Leonardo and Dante, and my ex-wife there, their mom. It's fucking beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Getting that medal.
Yeah.
Beautiful. But it was those Friday nights, it was waking up Saturday morning super early, going to Lake Okanagan. I think that's what it's called over in Jersey, to go swim in some mossy lake for a couple hours on a Saturday and then go run around the woods. Like, that's where the change happened. That's what I fell in love with.
Yeah.
Not so much that community, but knowing what I'm fucking capable of.
Yeah.
And then when I started doing the ultras, it's like I'm applying those lessons to something that I'm really enjoying, that I'm really like finding myself in. And like, that's powerful stuff. And then I was starting to apply those lessons in my personal life, in my professional life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's powerful when you understand that you have power.
Yeah.
That you have something in, and we all have it, man. It's just whether or not you can tap into it. It doesn't have to be running crazy distances, man. If you're into like basket weaving, throw yourself into
anything.
Throw yourself into it.
Yeah.
Find your community in basket weaving. Learn different patterns, learn how to thread different fibers together.
How would you say that someone can go about finding that power, and just kind of like, I guess, that strength within to be able to go ahead and dive and find that community?
I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
That answer I can't give to anybody else. I think it would be kind of phony on my part. I can only speak for myself, and just like being, having that, like one of the things that running allows me to do, I don't run with music or anything like that at all, but it allows me to have like a moving meditation, right? So it allows me time to focus on my day, focus on my relationships with people, focus on my relationships with my community, review where I'm at with myself, have this constant internal dialogue, so I'm very introspective, even by nature. I think I'm painfully analytical at times too. And spending all this time by myself, I keep my mind occupied. I'm reviewing my life and where I'm at. And that is like that moving meditation is. Yeah. That's what allowed me to see what my inner worth is. And it's not because someone was like, oh, great job, Gagz, or, whatever, dude. No, it's about seeing things for myself. And not for nothing, man. I got two sons, Leonardo and Dante, 18 and 16. Love them to death. But they're like, when I was living at home with them, I had two sets of eyes watching everything I'm doing. Yeah. Everything I'm doing. I could never like look my boys in the eye and be like, oh, I didn't finish this race because I was tired. What kind of example is that setting for my sons? Like, I'm raising two men, or whatever they choose to identify as one day. Yeah. I don't care. But I'm raising two men, two adults. Let me back that. Let me rephrase that. I'm raising two adults, okay, to be prosperous, to be humane, to be compassionate, to work hard, to strive for excellence, so it's like, if I can't look them in the eye and be honest with them, then I can't be honest with myself either.
Dude, you started to make me tear up, man. I was like, already. No, but it's just so powerful. And knowing that you have these two sets of eyes looking up to you, and you want to do everything to show them the best possible example, and for them, and also to define like whatever a man should be, a human being should be, whether that's like just showing empathy, kindness, going after what it is that you want, and leaning into community, having a sense of vulnerability.
What's so nice about it, Aaron, is like they play football for their high school. They're both at Central. They play football. They're on the football team, and they're getting the things that I'm telling them that they've seen me say over the years and do over the years, their coaches are telling them. And like one of their coaches played in the NFL. So when he talks, they listen.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same things I'm saying. But the things I've instilled in them, it makes me proud, because when they interact with their teammates and they tell me about their interactions, it's like me talking to me, you know, and that's pretty cool. So that's even more of a reason why I'm going to keep going. Like, I'm not going to rest on my laurels.
Yeah.
I'm just not.
And to your point about like, it's kind of like you talking to you, do you find that sometimes you find yourself, even now, kind of like reparenting that inner child within along your journey with your sons?
You say reparenting?
Yeah, like kind of like a sense of like, I feel like as we get older, right, it's all about like nurturing that inner child within us. You know, we are adults, but like at the same time, we still have that kid within
what
us.
I'm very mindful with my sons is like, you know, I mentioned I was a little bit of an oddball growing up, right? My parents are awesome. I love them to death, but they're, you know, I was raised blue collar and middle class up in the far Northeast. You know, my dad was born in Italy. My mom's folks were born in Italy. You know, they're awesome people, but they're simple. You know, they're not complex people. They're kind of black and white in some respects. And not that they're ignorant. I don't mean that at all, but they didn't know how to handle a dude like me growing up, frankly, you know? And so as a result, I was rebellious, you know? So I'm very mindful with my sons to give them the space to like come to me, and some of the stuff they tell me is wild, man. And they tell me this stuff because I don't judge, you know? I'm very honest. I'm with them. I'm open with them. I create that space for them to come to me. So I guess I'm kind of parenting them the way that I would like to have been parented. And again, this is no knock. When my parents watch or see this, I love you guys to death. I'm not, you know, but we all do the best that we can with what we have. And sometimes it's good enough and sometimes it's not. And, you know, that's that.
Dude, and you're showing up for your sons in the way that, you know, obviously giving all the kudos to your parents as well, but then just kind of shifting to kind of like how you want for them to show up in their lives. And I absolutely love that, guys. You're setting an amazing example and a role model for them.
And that makes me proud. That makes me more proud than like any podium that I've ever been on.
Yeah.
For real.
And allowing them to kind of like create that space. And I feel like you have been able to do that because you've been on like this transformative journey. Like, I know we mentioned earlier, like, what was like a transformative run for you? How were you able to connect with like nature and kind of like just yourself overall? But your community, leaning into your community has allowed for you to show up for your sons in that way.
Yeah. And it's
authentically.
By leaning into my community, it's made me a happier, kinder, more compassionate, empathetic human being. And my energy is brighter. You know, so the energy I'm putting out is attracting good energy in return. So it's like a mirror of what I want to see out there. I'm trying to be the person I want other people to be.
Absolutely.
But also be myself too.
You get out what you put out.
Right.
100%. So if your sons are seeing that good energy, and they also are able to see how the community is impacting you, like, hey, look at dad, like he's absolutely crushing it. He's showing up for us in ways that we wouldn't even fathom or would think that a man would, because, you know, growing up, I feel like sometimes there are very like rigid ways for like what a man should be. And it's kind of like, now we're breaking barriers, you know, and you know, the term of like toxic masculinity, but there is no linear way of how you should be when it comes to being a man or just a human being in general. And you're allowing them to kind of have that shade of gray when sometimes it's deemed to be like, okay, it's just black and white, but it's not just black and white. And I love that. When
I made the decision to leave my old life behind, my professional life, I don't know if we're going to talk about it or not, but when I made that decision, it wasn't a tough decision to make, but it was an adjustment period.
Well, let's talk. Tell me about that.
Well, the thing I want to say is when I made that adjustment, before we even talk about it, it was just like both my sons told me how proud they were of me for having the courage and the fortitude to make that decision. That they didn't, like, I was worried because it was a little bit of an adjustment period. Like I told them, I was like, listen guys, Christmas this year, it's going to be a little light. And they're like, that's okay, Dad. That's fine. You know? And I made it up to them fine. but they were just really happy and proud of me. And yeah, that made me feel really good. So in my old life, I spent almost 20 years as a parole agent. I resigned as a supervisor in a blaze of glory. But that profession had no longer suited me. It no longer suited my needs. So I had to make a decision to leave,
What was the moment where you realized, okay, like this is no longer for me? What sparked that? Because I know you and I have talked it before in the past, and we were talking about like 2020, the pandemic hit, and then the George Floyd situation, and being there in that environment with so many people of color. Yeah.
That's when things really started to change for me. I had always, like, prior to 2020 and the pandemic, I was always I had this mindset like, well, fuck it.
Yeah.
I'm going to retire from here. I'll get the gold watch, whatever, I'll just tough it out. Like, I'll just do what I got to do and get it done. All right. But at the same time, I was also pulling further and further away. I stopped playing the political games. I stopped doing those little things to advance my career. And because I'd seen for myself, I'd seen what a shim-sham the whole thing was, and just a system of poverty pimps, and it was broken. And I used to use the analogy of Sisyphus from Greek mythology, his punishment was to roll a boulder up the hill every day. And he'd wake up the next day and a boulder be at the bottom of the mountain.
Yeah.
And that was his punishment for eternity. And that's how it got to feel. And then, 2020 comes around, and I had 600-mile races on the books that year, and it was going to be my big breakout year as an ultra runner, right? I had done some other stuff, probably done Leadville, the Tahoe 200, started making a name for myself in this local area, and a little bit beyond, but then the world shut down, and that's when I had moved forward with my idea to map out, you mentioned it in the intro, about Philly Four Corners, where I ran the perimeter of the city of Philadelphia. And when I mapped it out, it wound up being 76 miles. And and actually the 5-year anniversary was 2 days ago, April 25th, 2020.
Yeah. Happy anniversary.
Thanks, man. Thank you. But yeah, I had mapped it out, and I ran it, and it was 76.1 miles, I think. When I put it on my social media, that night I went to bed, woke up the next day, and I was literally everywhere, man. Like the New York Times, every news agency here in the city and beyond. Like the Sixers did a whole thing on me and let me know that if the basketball season wasn't canceled, I'd be ringing the bell. And I didn't even know what ringing the bell means as a Sixers fan. Like they awarded me Best of Philly from, and it's what my kids call I leveled up. Like my kids would say, Dad, like you leveled up, right? Yeah. All right, fine.
All there is. Yeah.
Fine. But like, I didn't do it any for that. I was just trying to create something for me and my friends to do while all of our races got canceled. And like, during that time period, okay, my status in the local community was now elevated. Number one. Number two, the world is on fire, literally. Eddie and I, my friend Eddie, were on a run that afternoon. I believe it was May 1st, 2020. We sat there and watched them burn the first cop car right in front of City Hall. I never posted the pictures because I never felt like it was my place to kind of share that. It wasn't my protest to share, shall we say. But I was there for it, and we watched everything burn. And then we ran around the city that day, and, and that's when things, and like, even when the news stories started coming out about me and what I had done, like there was reference to my profession, and I was mortified that was out there because I had started to just really, I just knew it wasn't for me.
Do you think do you think that you were more mortified because of like the height of it all, like what was going on at that time? And it's like, no.
I mean, maybe a little bit of that. Maybe I felt a little bit of like knowing that I'm just a fucking cog in the machine that's broken, there was a little bit of that, but it was more so like, if I'm embarrassed to admit to someone what I do for a living, like, how can I like look my sons in the eyes and put food on their table, if I'm not proud of what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Like, I work with some good people, in my old life, but it wasn't for me, you know, and I felt like after a while, it just became like, you know, we're just recycling people of color and putting them in a cage and taking them out and putting them in some horseshit program and blah, blah. And it's just, it never ended. You know, there was very, very few success stories, hardly ever, you know, dealing with confrontations. Like I'd have confrontations all day, every day. Well, then you come home and you're like, you got to turn it off. How do you turn it off? You can't turn it off. I'm always in like battle mode. I'm ready to go, you know? And I had it. Man, I had it. All that stuff starts happening in 2020. I was left with no choice. You know, to me, it was a no-brainer. It was just a matter of having the courage to make that decision. You know, and I'll keep it real, man. I didn't make that decision by myself either. When I had submitted my resignation letter, you know, I had a real long talk with my children's mother, and I love her to death. To this day, we're no longer married, obviously, but like, you know, she let me know, because I was like, listen, you know, I got the kids are on my insurance and this and that. And she's like, dude, she's like, all I need from you right now is you keep being a good dad. Just keep being a good dad. You do that, we'll figure everything else out. Like, and you know, to her and to our credit, when we finalized our divorce, Aaron, not a single lawyer was present. It was she and I sitting down, talking about it like adults. We had a lawyer draw up the final divorce decree and whatnot, but like, yeah. So, you know, she really gave me the freedom, and and I don't use this word lightly, man. Like, I'm not religious. It was a blessing. You know, she gave me that freedom to go leave my old life behind and go pursue a new life that everyone knows would make me happier. You know, so I give her a lot of credit for that. It didn't work out the way it was, you know, I got 50 something ultras, 0 DNFs. My one DNF is my marriage. All right, fine. You know, but I had children with the right person. I knew I made that decision. The right decision.
You have built a life.
She's a great mom. And my kids are well adjusted.
I heard this quote from Matthew Hussey, who is kind of like a relationship expert, and he gives out relationship advice. But, you know, even if sometimes relationships don't work out, you know, you take that chance, and it's like, you find someone who is going to be a better builder with you. You know, you look and you're kind of like, who do I want to build with? And it sounds like you had that at the time. Things worked
out the way they did, but you know, what are you going to do?
Exactly. Just take it day by day.
One of the pivotal points in all that was the New York Times had been following me around. They were doing a feature on me, and you know, I'm talking with the New York Times reporter, and the story actually wound up going into Ultrarunning magazine. It was written by Jared Beasley. Love that guy. Shout out, Jared. And we're having these series of interviews. We would talk every 2 or 3 Thursdays, anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours at a pop. And he really took the time to get to know me. And, you know, we started talking about my job. And it was just like, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm talking to the New York Times and I'm embarrassed. Like, this has got to stop. And that was actually it. I mean, and so I made the decision in September 21. No, I'm sorry. Was it 21? 22. September 22.
Okay.
I had made that decision to leave my job. So that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, when I'm sitting here talking with the New York Times and I'm like embarrassed. I was like, this has got to stop. I never looked back. And how was my exit from there? It was a blaze of glory. You know, my degree is in English literature. And I swear I got my degree just to be able to write that resignation letter. It was only 5 or 6 sentences. You know, I CC'd the New York Times, blind copied the New York Times on my resignation letter, blind copied a few people in the department as well as the court system, sent it out to the people it needed to be sent to. And I set the building on fire and left. I submitted it 12 o'clock Friday afternoon. I was working for Philly Runner that following Tuesday. Full time.
Just walked away. You're like, building on fire. Ever seen The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger?
Sorry.
There's a scene where like the Joker burns down the hospital and he just like walks away and gets on the school bus. I'm like picturing you just kind of like walking off.
I lit that building on fire and I walked out.
And to think that like if you continue to stay with that profession, we might not even be sitting here having this conversation. We might not even really get to see the impact that you actually have in the running community.
I don't think that
you do.
Would be possible either. No. No, because it's just no.
So I just want to give you kind of like a thank you for just being able to
Thank you,
pivot
man.
and take that
You're
change and
welcome.
also be here, bro. Because even just having this conversation with you, like just learning so much and the impact once again that you have and how you're able to move so many different people in their lives to
Well, let me
take
say this
change.
now. Let me throw you a little bit of kudos too now. You
Yeah.
know, for the folks at home, I started working at Philly Runner. You know, like I'm in my late 40s. Everyone I'm working with is like a fucking young lion. They're in their early 20s. They're all in shape. They're running this. They're running that. You know, and I'm
Yeah.
got a big gray beard, and I could be anyone's father.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I remember just walking down to the basement where all the shoes are, and like it's just a labyrinth. And it's wild to think like 3 years later, I'm down there organizing everything. You know, now
Yeah.
I'm that dude. But you know, I went down and I couldn't find a shoe and this and that. And you're like,
Yeah.
you're just Aaron. You're like, you just gave me like a little hug and you're like, Gagz, you're gonna be okay. You know, da 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 da.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron. Like, thanks.
Yeah.
I needed that day because I think day 4 or 5, and yo,
Yeah.
bro, not for nothing. I literally upped my life insurance policy that fucking morning, and then
Yeah.
that afternoon, someone gets dropped off by their mom, and she's got a free 8th period in a high school to work this shift. And I'm saying to myself, what the fuck did I just do? Like, I've upped my life insurance policy, and I'm working with someone who's 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck? Like, my brain was, it was a period of adjustment, man. I never regretted my decision for a nanosecond. But yeah, man.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna need to up the life insurance because walking up and down the steps, one can fall on your toe. You just never know.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. But that was kind of like
So
the
thank you
perfect.
for that, Adam, because
Yeah,
I
of course.
never forgot that, man.
The perfect picture of me. And I think I definitely remember that. Like coming down, I was like, I got
Yeah.
this. Because you come into an environment and community. I mean, you're familiar with the running community, but also like there's so much like, I guess, like tech and like logistics behind like, actually selling the shoe, learning like the insole, the terminology, the verbiage, how to
And that's the
communicate
thing,
it.
bro. Like
Yeah.
when I started working there, like, oh, I know about running.
Yeah.
Psh, please.
Yeah. I thought I
knew
did too.
what worked for me.
Yeah.
That's it. I didn't know. I didn't even understand whatever. I was woefully ignorant
Yeah.
of what goes on in the run specialty industry.
Yeah.
So now I have a 360 view and it's pretty cool,
Mm-hmm.
but it definitely wasn't like that in the beginning.
Yeah,
Not at all.
absolutely. You learn so much on the job training
Yeah.
too. And I feel like we're constantly learning. Someone can come in with like an injury that like I've never heard about. And I'm like, okay. Like I'm gonna be very honest here. Sometimes someone will come in and be like, hey, like I have this. And I'm like downstairs Googling, I'm like, what type of best shoe will be best for this injury? I'm like, I've never heard that before. But that's the thing, like you think you are getting all of the training that you need at the very beginning. But then you learn as you're going throughout it that there's still so much more for you to learn. There's still so much more for you to grasp.
Yeah.
And that's why when I gave you that hug and you were starting, I was kind of like, hey, like just take it day by day because there's a lot of information involved and you're not going to be able to digest it all in one sitting. Like you have to allow yourself the grace to be able to learn and to be curious, do your research. And at the end of the day, like just allow yourself to kind of go into that role, but just not with like a high expectation. Yeah. Well, speaking of Philadelphia Runner, I'm kind of curious because now that we're both there, it's just amazing because I feel like we have such a great banter. And then also like the people that come in there and the community there, we're seeing how much Philadelphia Runner has grown, with the 3 locations that are active right now. And then University City opening up pretty soon after, the small fire that we had around Christmas. But what would you say Philadelphia Runner has taught you and impacted you as a person and how it, showing up for your community?
Man, first thing I'm going to say is I'm eternally thankful to Ross and Liz. And I remember taking Liz out to lunch before I put my resignation in. I took her out to lunch on Thursday, sat her down, told her what I was thinking about doing. And can I work for Philly Runner? And she was like her jaw hit the table.
Yeah.
And then we walked over to meet Ross at the store and I told him and he was like, and I'm like, yeah, and I put my resignation, my letter went the following day. I submitted my letter. So I'm eternally thankful to Ross because when they had hired me on the spot, we never talked about money or anything like that. They recognized, like we all recognize this is a mutually beneficial situation for both of us, and they treated me with respect, like an adult. And just really allowed me to kind of like Keith Straw is someone I really admire in this local community, someone who I aspire to be. And I had him on my show way back in the day. And he had this this saying that really stuck with me. It's jump and find your wings on the way down. You know, and being at Philly Runner, they allowed me to kind of jump and find my wings on the way down, and I landed with, you know, a nice soft cushion, you know. So I'm eternally thankful to Philly Runner. Now, to your question, what has it taught me? You know, I think the thing it really taught me is how to meet people where they're at. You know, I remember I wasted 2 lunch periods in my old life walking over to the old location, 16th and Sampson, and being too embarrassed and afraid to walk into the store. That's for real. Third day I go over there, I'm like, this is stupid. Like, you're not even going back to work with lunch. Like, walk in the fucking store. Get over yourself. Like, go in the store. Because in my mind, everybody that worked there was like, you know, track stars. And they're this and they're that. And I'm like, I don't have any proper gear. Like, I was wearing some bullshit horseshit shoe on the treadmill. Like, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was too proud to, you know. So I eventually worked up the courage to go in there, and it was a wonderful experience, you know. So a lot of times when I'm working, like, I remember what it was like to walk into that store, you know, to walk into that store and speak with someone who's eons beyond where I'm ever going to be, or at least where I thought I'd be as a runner, you know? So it taught me how to really meet people where they're at on their journey. And it doesn't have to be running. It could be just being comfortable. Like, I can tell you so many, you have stories too. You know, but you make these little connections with people, you know, and I think one of the things over the years is, you know, back in the day, I was a bartender. So you learn how to make a connection with somebody pretty quickly. I mean, sure, you're doing it for tips. Fine. But you learn how to make those connections. In my old life as a parole agent, you know, you had to make connections. Otherwise, you're really going to fail at the job. So I was always, and I didn't necessarily walk around with a law enforcement hat on my head. I very much skewed on the social worker side of things, especially as the years went on in my career. You know, I would do whatever I could not to put a dude in prison or put him back in prison. If it, you know, sometimes you have to do it, and that's that, fine. But I'd go to sleep with a clear conscience, knowing that I made it very clear, you know, what needs to be done and the consequences and the chances and all other happy horse shit that went involved in that. Like, I would go to sleep with a clear conscience, knowing that I did what I had to do, but, you know?
And to your point about meeting people where they are, Philly Runner has taught me patience.
You make connections with people on the job. You have to allow them to be able to open up and talk to you. You know, you learn how to ask open-ended questions as opposed to just yes or no questions. You learn motivational interviewing techniques. So now I'm coming into the job at Philly Runner. I'm like a bartender, you know, to a certain degree. I'm able to make connections with people. And it's so cool when, like, I'm out on a run and I see someone who I helped. I don't remember their face, you know, but they're like, hey man, thank you very much. You know, and like, even in my old life, I used to hang out with the old heads. Like, I used to work so hard to get their approval back in the day. Like the old heads, the guys that have been around forever, you know, like the uncles at the cookout, you know, you know, and I'd hang with those guys. And like, you know, when they accepted me, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. You know, the one thing that I learned many things from those gentlemen, but one thing in particular was, you know, most of these guys are going to have a couple POs in their life. You're going to have thousands, you know, and they're going to know you. They're going to remember you a lot more than you're going to remember them. So not that I was ever, you know, an office tough guy. That's never my style, you know, but you learn how to treat men with respect, you know, because I can't tell you how many times even to this day, man, I'm in a restaurant. Dude comes out the kitchen. Yo, Mr. G. If I hear Mr. G, I know where that's coming from in my old life. And it's like, I've had interactions with men who I've put back in prison, who I've seen come out of the kitchen and be like, yo, Mr. J, I just want to thank you. It's like, whoa, you know, for treating me like a man, for treating me with respect. I know you were just doing your job. It needed to be done. If I had been out there in them streets, I'd be dead, you know? Okay. So you learn how to meet people, how to get connections, how to have those connections.
And you kind of have allowed for like the perfect segue, but I kind of want to go back to your point about, like, you know, working at Philly Runner and, you know, the connection with like Ross and Liz, you know, and just how they show up for their community and for their workers. You know, I would say it's more so like the family than workers. You know, they've really curated a family and an environment there where it is a safe environment and you can show up authentically as yourself. I mean, for me, given the opportunity to be like, hey, Aaron, like, do you want to post on social media? I mean, I've been featured so many times on like, the Instagram page and like creating TikToks, and she's always like, hey, like, whatever you want to do, Aaron, do it. I'll give you the login information. I'm like, okay, great. Like, I would do whatever you want me to do. But it allows me to show up authentically as myself because I love creating content. I was able to get an article in like the Win magazine because they just asked me to just write whatever you want to write. And I would have never been introduced to like the Win had I not left, working in banking and pivoting to working in the running scene and them just welcoming me with open arms. So to your point about like, just them allowing you the space to grow, they have allowed so much space for me to grow also. And just to hone in on like my talents, and even sitting here with you and starting a podcast, like I would have never really been introduced to the community had I not pivoted. And so they just so much kudos and so much love. And Ross and Liz, if you're listening, like giving you guys your flowers, and Jess and Manioc, everyone, Jonna, Center City, Tracy and GE, like Fen, all of you guys are just doing an amazing job at just showing up for people, your team and your family, and allowing us to just be who we are and be who we want to be. Even if that's not with running,
and I want to mention Jen too.
And Jen, because she loves, like I love collaborating with her on apparel. But like, even if your end journey is not running,
here's the thing, man, that really all those years I shopped at Philly Runner before working for Philly Runner, I used to walk in there and be like, are they putting acid in the Kool-Aid? Like, how is everybody there so pleasant and happy? Like, what is going on?
Someone's going to sit here and say Gagz and Aaron are
and like, here I am 3.5 years later. And I'm in it. I'm in it. I pushed all in, man. I don't know if I'm going to be there forever. I don't know, but I love where I'm at. I don't sit in my apartment and dread going to work. I think I've maybe worked 4 hours. In all my time at Philly Runner. Not to say that I don't do my job and I don't bust my ass. Like I do all that. But it doesn't feel like work. Like that old saying, like, dude, I used to daydream in my old life. Like, what would it be like just to, wear like running shorts and a t-shirt to work every day? What would that be like? Bro, they're paying me to run when I lead the group runs every Thursday, 6 p.m., 1711 Walnut Street. I'm getting paid to run. That's the dream.
That's the life. Right? It doesn't feel like work.
No, never. Never.
Absolutely.
Like I remember what it was like when like I would tag them on an Instagram post and they'd like it, or they'd share it on their stories, or they started following me. And now it's like I got the login. I make posts. Full circle moment. Man.
Exactly. So much so your podcast was even sponsored by Philly Runner, and they had a discount code for people who were shopping.
Running Times with Gagz. Or listen to your favorite episodes, your favorite podcasts. But so I love Philly Runner.
I'm like, you better plug it. Once again, like I mentioned, just coming back to kind of like the perfect segue and people running into you in the community. I kind of want to talk a little bit about like, okay, you had this speaking event with Rachel from Women in Ultra Running. Amazing. Love her. How are you able to show up for your community and then give advice at an event like that where you're kind of instructing someone about ultra running, giving them tips where they might have a little bit of maybe like high expectations for who you are, and like, they've been following you for some time?
It's what I just said, man. It's like I was the wad of cookie dough walking into the YMCA. I know what that feeling's like. I know what it's like to burn 2 lunch periods before having the courage to walk in the store. So I remember after I finished that Rocky 50K, Mary Arnold gave me her information. She didn't know I was going to be a maniac about it. I peppered her with questions left and right, man. So I know, and there's levels. Everything we do in this life, there's levels, right? So maybe I'm at a certain level and someone's not there, but there's people who I look up to, So maybe someone looks up to me. That's awesome. There's people who I look up to also. I don't lose track of that. So, and I don't take it for granted. It's to me, it's a privilege and it's a responsibility that I take very, very seriously. I don't take it lightly. So for me, it's about being that pudgy dude walking in the store, So when I'm in front of it, I'm having these kinds of, this is the second year we've had it now. It's been a success 2 years in a row, like being able to, because I can talk about ultra running all day long. First of all, I can talk all day long, period. But
yeah,
we talk about ultra running all day long. So the real struggle is just being able to trim the fat on the presentation and talk about the meat of the matter and what really matters most. So it's pretty empowering. It makes me feel like I'm giving back to my community, kind of like the way I was when I was doing the podcast series. Very much how I am when I coach the athletes that I work with. Yeah, that's how it feels. It's cool. It's a privilege.
Yeah,
It truly is. And I've been very fortunate over the years, man. I've had good crew around me. I've had good people giving me advice. So it's like, here's the thing, man. If I've got people in my corner who have mentored me, taken me under their wing over the years, I think the biggest betrayal I could give to their friendship and their mentorship is to not provide that same type of knowledge to someone who's seeking it. Like, I'm not a gatekeeper. That's not me. That's not how I want to be known in this sport. I want to be a capybara, man.
Yeah.
Like, everyone loves a capybara.
Yeah.
They're the most loved animals. They have no enemies. They sit on crocodiles and snouts and don't get bitten. Like, I want to be a capybara.
Yeah.
And to do that, you got to meet people where they're at and get over yourself. Get off the high horse, put the ego aside.
Yeah.
It's like, be genuine and charitable with your knowledge.
Are there any, like, when the crowd's coming in, you're setting up those chairs? Because I remember being there, before I left, and you were kind of like organizing the upstairs area. The nerves and the thought process and like in the mind, what is that like? Do you find it like as you have more speaking engagements and events like that, it becomes easier, or do you still kind of go into it?
I know, even like today, I was bundle of nerves coming over here, but I know once we start talking, I'm going to be fine.
Yeah.
So before an event like that, like, I know the topic at hand.
Yeah.
I can do a TED talk on ultra running with zero prep if I had to, so it's not that. It's just, I guess, like, just knowing how hard it can be to start, to take the first step. It's really, really difficult. And that could be for anything. So if you've got somebody that you can look up to, that you can reach out for information, that makes taking that first step even like a little bit easier. It's never easy, but it makes it a little bit easier. So when I do a presentation like that, I remember where I was training for that first 10K, walking into the YMCA like a wad of cookie dough. And yeah, I have to honor that person. And the way I honor that person is by being who I am today and paying it forward. So does that make sense?
Yeah. If you could go back and kind of the you that we kind of just touched on a little bit before we actually dive into all of this, and spark the change, like the YMCA, the running, the Ironman. If you can kind of think back to who that person was at the time to where you are now and kind of like just give them like one message, like, what would that be, if anything?
Yeah, don't wait 10 years to leave to leave that job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't wait 10 years.
Yeah.
Don't, because I wasted a lot of time, man. And like, I feel sometimes now that I have to kind of do more. Like, I feel like I'm on borrowed time sometimes because I lost a lot of I spent 19 years, and the vast majority of that time, I didn't like what I did. I didn't believe in what I did. And it just got worse and worse and worse. So yeah, I would say, don't be afraid. Like, yeah, just take a chance on yourself. That's what I would tell myself, my old self.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier when that we were talking about kind of, it's not necessarily about the destination. I mean, knowing where your destination is kind of a journey. It's a journey, it's all about who you become along that journey to the destination, or whatever that final destination is meant to be for you. And, leaning into the curiosity, because at the end of the day, as human beings, we're always becoming, and if you try to put, I guess, like very rigid views and like a timeline on how you're supposed to become this person or accomplish your goals, you're never going to get there. You're setting yourself up for disaster because of these high expectations that you have for kind of like, I don't know, to check off these boxes, or for what you think society wants you to accomplish, or for like what your family is. Literally the process of becoming who you're supposed to be.
Even in ultra running, it's never going to go the way you think it's going to go. You have to be flexible. You have to be adaptive. You got to have a plan A through plan Z.
Yeah.
You know, and be able to make the adjustments on the fly, or else you are going to fail.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of the same, like those principles, like those things, those little lessons I've learned over the years in ultra running. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you know me personally, like I make analogies all the time, man. And most of the time they're about, like, my kids are like, oh God, Dad, another running analogy. And I'm like, yeah.
I feel like just this conversation in general has been like so insightful. And as we're concluding and kind of getting there, and we're talking about like self-empowerment and self-discovery, I kind of want to touch on, this Instagram post that was so empowering for me, and also was one of the main reasons why, I mean, just knowing you over the couple of years, I've always wanted to sit down and have a conversation with you together. We did with Valentina, on your podcast. But now you and I are sitting here and, to talk a little bit more beyond the run, right? And beyond like the accomplishments and the medals. So this Instagram post, and I have a couple quotes right here. Sure. We can kind of discuss about it. On November 17th of last year, 2024, a couple of the things that you said in that post where it was very much of like, I felt the message was you accepting yourself going into like the new year and just giving yourself your flowers and tuning out the noise from the outside and what others may have thought that you should be, or what you thought you should have been at a particular time. And you said, the reward for conformity is that everyone likes you except for yourself. Pursuing your dreams and living your best life and true authentic self is what matters most. So I'm curious, what does living your best life mean to you? And also like the conformity, like.
I knew we were going to talk about this.
Yeah.
So, because when you had asked me to be on the podcast, you had referenced that. So over the weekend, I was like, I better reread that post. I started like looking at my journal from around that time period and what had led me to write that. So I did make a couple notes
absolutely.
About that. But like when I had put that post out, it was a 3-year anniversary of me moving down to the city. Oh, I'm sorry. It was the 3-year anniversary of me like leaving my job. Like moving into the city. It was my 4-year anniversary of being down in the city on my own, like in Center City, living by myself. I always had a roommate or lived with a girl or or whoever. I was never living in a studio apartment by myself ever.
Yeah.
So it was kind of that, like, I was going through all that. I was trying to like take stock of where I was. And so your question was about living my authentic life.
Correct. Yeah. And where you said the reward for conformity is that everyone likes you except for yourself. That resonated with me.
Sure.
You and I've had conversations about trying to
think about it, man. Like I had the nice career, I had the golden handcuffs. I had a beautiful home up in the far northeast section of the city in old Somerton, next block over within the city. There's no sidewalks.
Yeah.
Nice piece of ground. I'd cut the grass every week. Yeah. Like, I had all the things, all the trappings you're supposed to have. But I wasn't happy. So what am I doing? Am I doing this shit because I'm supposed to? Like, it's not a midlife crisis, but like it would be a crisis if my life was mid, if that makes sense.
Oh, that was,
know what I mean?
That was like powerful. Ooh,
yeah. All right. So like, if I'm doing this and I'm saying I'm not doing this for the kudos or the likes or anything else like that, like I don't get, like I even said in that post, a lion gives 2 fucks about the opinions of sheep, right? Like, be your own person. That's where when you conform to something that you're not, other people are going to like you, but you're going to have a hard time looking yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
Like, so, and when I talk about like living my best life and being my true authentic self, it's like, it's being aligned with who I really am and not what other people expect me to be.
Yeah.
All right. Like, and I have a couple things here. This is just, I put down 5 points that I think
please share.
Like knowing yourself deeply, your passions, your values, your dreams, and even your quirks, man. And like not just knowing them, but accepting them without shame. Own your shit. Stand on business, son.
Yeah.
Like, own it. That's number 1. Number 2, when you make choices, like whether your choices are big or small, your choices should reflect your truth. And even if they go against the grain, like I know people, when I had made that decision, and I'm not talking about the decision to, get separated and divorced. That's I'm not talking about that. But when I made the decision to leave my old life, I know people were like, what the fuck is this guy on? Like,
yeah.
Who does this? Who goes and leaves a nice career to work in a shoe store? It's so much more than a shoe store, guys.
Mm-hmm.
But like, who does that?
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, I don't care. Letting go of the fear, the fear of like, what do I have? I have the fear of judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of like not being enough.
Mm-hmm.
Man, put the ego aside, because at the end of the day, we're just on a big rock spinning around the sun, and none of it matters.
Yeah.
No one gives a fuck about you. You ain't that important. So let go of that and like act with the courage. And like, if you make a decision and you have conviction, stand by it. Like, whatever you're like, so just let go of that fear, because if you go into it with an open heart, you're not going to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It might not be the result you wanted, but you're going to learn from that. So let go of that fear. Finding joy. Sure, I can sit here, I can show you, we can go to my apartment. I got shoe boxes full of awards and medals and buckles, and all those things make me happy. I take pride in that.
Yeah.
But I take pride in the little things too. My relationships with people, my relationships in the community, like little moments of self-expression or growth. Like, I getting better at honoring that for myself. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And then I think the last time, like the last thing would be just like prioritizing your own well-being.
Yeah.
One of the things, if you're going to be a competitive ultra runner, is you got to be selfish a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you shirk your responsibilities or your relationships with people, but like, you've got to trim the fat. You've got to, there's a certain mindset. And like, so when I apply that to my own well-being, it's like, well, I have to take like my mental health, my physical health, my spiritual health, my emotional health, it all has to be like prioritized, and I think if you're like, so it's not about reaching some perfect ideal that's unattainable. It's more about like just being genuinely present, invested in the moment, in the here and the now, run the mile that you're in, all that happy horse shit. That's what I think living your best life and you're being your true authentic self is all about. Like, when you're able to show up for yourself, who you are, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, man, I absolutely love that. Another clap.
Thank
you. You made this point earlier too about being alone with your thoughts and along the runs too,
for better or for worse.
Exactly. But for me, and just kind of like my overall just healing journey and coming into myself, and even being able to sit here and have this conversation with you, it took being alone and sitting with those like uncomfortable truths about what I was doing, and kind of relearning a new process, and also realizing like, okay, like this is what I'm capable of. I knew that I was capable of so much more in my life, but I was doing kind of like the bare minimum. I was still just kind of coasting by and wanting more. But it was like, okay, Aaron, what can you do to like change a little bit? Like, you're not going at your full potential. And I realized I had to take a huge look at my circle around me, cultivate a space for myself that allowed me to show up who I was at that time, but also people that I knew would hold me accountable for the person that they know that I can be, whether it's my talent or just, just the, how would I put it? Just being able to realize my own power and step into my own truth and allow myself to shine authentically. And I had to like get out of my head. Now, there were some bumps along the road that allowed me to do that. And I do not take those for granted. I love being by myself. I love being in solitude because it really allows me just to connect more with myself and be able to realize like what I want. Also, the people that I want around me. I am someone who is very intentional about the space and the people that I have with me. If you're no longer serving me and you're not adding to the positive, welcoming, unconditional. But then at the same time, like I understand sometimes like things can be conditional.
Yeah.
Like, like let's take a romantic relationship, for instance. Like, okay, my love is conditional for how you're going to show up for me, because if you're not showing up for me in this particular way, you're not going to get it. So I think now I have a very intentional way and very more focused, and I'm more in tune with who I am because I've allowed myself to be in solitude and to focus on where I see myself going, and to not, for a long time, used to want people to understand me. If I was misunderstood, or if I posted something that someone didn't like, or if I said something someone didn't like, or just took it the wrong way, for, better wording, I would immediately try to like backtrack and be like, okay, well, actually, I didn't say that. Oh my gosh, like I have to be the nicest person. I'm so sorry. Like, actually, like I didn't mean this. But I realized there's so much power in being misunderstood, and I really don't give a damn whether or not you understand me or not. Like, I can spend my entire life trying to get you to understand me. And at the end of the day, I can tell you my story from, birth till now and all of the hard things that I've been through, and you may never get me. There are people who will never connect with you. And once I realized that, from being in solitude and realizing who my real community is, because at the height of success, you and I know the position that I was in last year, and then losing it, I was able to see who was really there for me, who really reached out, and who I was able to lean into, and who leaned into me, and who poured into me, which allowed me to reciprocate that energy.
Sure.
So once I saw that and stepped back, and not necessarily adding so much gravity and weight to titles, you talk about just living your authentic self and like what you want. I think for me, it took a while to grapple to the concept that my accomplishments do not define who I am, but who am I outside of that? If people only know me as this one particular thing, because I'm putting that out there, if I want people to know me for my job title, okay, at the end of the day, if that's gone, who am I? There was, I think maybe I mentioned this to you, but there was one point where I was working this particular job, and I showed up to an event and someone immediately introduced me as my title. And I was like, well, what just happened to Aaron as the person,
Yeah.
And I realized that, and I sat with that for a minute, and I was like, that's not how I want to show up in the world. I want people to know me just for who I am, my humor, being able to just, I don't know, connect with people on the way that feels right to me and feels safe to me. And if I don't feel that, and if I feel as though, and it, unintentionally, someone can just do that. I feel like it's very natural. People actually, the first question, oh yeah, like, what do you do? But if someone asks me that, I'm kind of like, why, automatically. So once I was able to sit back and realize, okay, these are the people that are for me through the hard times, through the rough times. And also, who am I if I don't have these things? And also being able to unpack maybe like childhood trauma and things that were like ingrained and instilled in me at a young age, and conditioned to believe that you have to be this particular way. And I unlocked that part where it was like, there is no one definition. There is no linear way to just be Aaron. I was able to live my most authentic life, tune out the noise, and you're going to like me if you like me, that's with anyone, I'm no longer worried, which is something that I used to put a value on.
You put your ego aside.
You put your ego aside, and you're just kind of like, you know what? You try, because sometimes it could be like, okay, cool, like whatever. And I do have those moments where I'm like, okay, but then also like that's the empath and like the compassion in me, where it's like I still want to be able to connect, and I do so with a very genuine mindset, which is why like you and I are able to sit here, because we just have such a genuine connection, and I love hearing what you have to say. But at the same time, I'm no longer going to bend over backwards to make someone try to understand, and that to me is living my best life. I'm going to be unapologetic about who I am, and there is nothing wrong with being an assertive person. I used to try to be so nice and feel so afraid and terrified, Gagz, to speak up in meetings and ask questions that I knew that like, okay, this is like an actual question that I can ask. This seems logical, but I'm not, because I'm scared, because I didn't think that I had a voice. And then someone else would ask that question. I was like, oh, I could have asked it. Why didn't I? So now is like, hey, like, I'm going to say what I have to say. And that allows me doing all of that and then sitting with myself. And I'm going to wrap up soon, but it allowed me sitting with myself in solitude, leaning into my community, leaning into the Philly running community, leaning into like going and having coffee with you, has allowed me so much growth. And that is what living my authentic life. I resonate with that post so much. That's why,
thank you.
Like, I really couldn't wait to talk about it, because I read it and I was like, whew, I was like, literally, I was
put
clapping.
It out there on that one.
Yeah. And I felt it. It was like heat. It was fire. And for me, going back to you inspiring other people, that inspired me just to continue to show up. Even 2025, starting a podcast, do people want to hear what I have to say? Like, that's intimidating and it's scary, because people can dissect what you want, what you say, forever, and it's out there forever. Oh yeah, you said this, you said that, Aaron. Okay, well, you know what? I can change my mind. Like, I did more research. At the end of the day, that's how I feel. And I'm going to stand on it. And if you don't like it, sorry, but at the end of the day, like,
my sons sent me a meme not too long ago, and they were calling me a legend. I was like, that's pretty cool. And the meme said this. It said, like, boys want attention, men want respect, legends don't give a fuck. Be a legend, Aaron. Keep being a legend. Yeah. Anybody listening, be a legend.
Be a legend. Thanks, guys. Me too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Continue to be a legend.
Thank you.
Wow, this was such an interesting post. That last line, you're here because you've accepted my invitation.
Yeah. Trim the fat, baby. Trim the fat. Like, yeah. This chapter of my life is by invitation only. That's the era. That's the season that I'm in right now. And I think, when I say that, like, the invitation, like, what does that mean? Like, what does this is another thing I had made notes on, because I wanted to get my thought proper for this conversation, because I knew this post was coming up. So I think the invitation comes when, like if you're going to be in my inner circle, and I know a lot of people, man, but I keep a very, very small circle. And I think, like, when you're in that circle, it's basically like you've got two authentic people, whose lives kind of brush up against one another. And, you realize, like, okay, I want to take this walk with you. Like, I want to go with you. And what does that mean? Like, how do you do that? Like, first and foremost is, like, be authentic, radically authentic if possible. Like, when you are fully yourself, you attract the people who you resonate with. Like, your energy, your real energy attracts, like, you get what you put out, and it can't be a performance. You have to be yourself. That's number one. Creating a space where people can feel as though they are their true self, like an emotional safe space, shall we say. When you give someone the space to be seen and heard and understood and cared for, that's part of the invitation. Having patience, recognizing that a true connection with somebody doesn't happen immediately, rarely, if at all. Like, it's through shared experiences over time, like, that's another way. I don't know how to phrase this. Like, I have in here live with open hands, but that's not what I'm trying to say. Like, what I want to say is hold tightly, let go lightly. The things that, instead of, like, I might even be contradicting myself here, but, like, you don't want to be clinging on to something necessarily. Yeah. You want to, like, live with an open heart, with an open mind, and allow, like, those types of relationships to naturally unfold and align themselves. And if they don't, let go. Let go lightly. Don't. What's done is done. What's in the past is in the past. You can't change that. Sometimes, like, you meet the right person at the wrong time. It is what it is, man. Yeah. Like, what are you going to do? And I think the last thing, and probably the most important thing, is, like, no one's going to respect you if you don't respect yourself. Like, if you don't carry like, if you do not walk through life like a fucking tiger, you're going to be eaten. Yeah. Like, you have to respect yourself. So, like, recognize your own worth, recognize your own value. If you see the value in yourself, then like, it makes companionship or whatever that is, it makes it easier. Like, you're not going to be in my, like, you're not going to roll in this life with me if you don't know who you are, if you don't have a backbone, if you don't have conviction, if you don't pursue the things that you want to do, if you're always saying coulda, shoulda, woulda, nah, man. Like,
yeah.
Good morning. Oh, it's windy outside. Oh, it's raining. Do you have your umbrella? Have a good day.
Yeah.
That's it.
RuPaul has a saying.
Let's hear it.
He always says, if you don't love yourself, how the hell can you love someone else?
There you go, man.
And that is so true. And
shout out RuPaul.
Shout out RuPaul, mama. But so true, because
RuPaul's
like how
cool, man.
Exactly. But how can you show up for someone else if you don't even love yourself? You know, that's a friend, that's a romantic interest, that's just your community. And if you can't show for yourself, if you can't figure out like what your values are, you'll accept anything. You know, they always say like, if you
stand for nothing, you will fall for anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I just don't want to fall for anything. You don't want to just fall for anything. None of us, the people who are fearless, who are trailblazers, the people who are really making change, don't just fall for anything.
Come too far to be backsliding over here.
Absolutely.
You know, like, I'm very intentional with my decisions these days, with who I choose to spend my time with, how I choose to spend my time with anybody or anything. Very, very intentional, man. I've trimmed the fat.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to call it a monastic existence, because that would be too pompous, but like, I live a very simple life, and that's what I'm all about these days.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I have the things I need. I have relationships with brands that I truly love and enjoy. They take care of me. They believe in me. I believe in them. We have a nice thing going on. I have a terrific job. Yeah. I have two tremendous sons. You know, like, I don't want for much. You know, I don't have, like I mentioned before, about these aspirations of like driving a Ferrari down Broad Street. If it happens, it happens. But like, I'm not chasing it. You know, I'm not trying to live in some big fancy house. Sure, I like clothes and wardrobe, but I'm not dripping in diamonds.
Yeah.
You know, I put a spritz of patchouli on in the morning. I'm not wearing some fancy cologne.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
And I found that there's so much meaning in like the small things.
Yeah.
The small moments.
And that's what I was saying earlier with that too. It's like recognizing those little moments of self-growth and self-expression, and like, being patient with yourself, giving yourself grace, you know, you can meet someone where they're at, fine, but meet yourself where you're at, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like, those are important things to me these days, where I didn't necessarily have that focus. And I have that mindset these days because of the decisions I've made. Yeah. And how good it makes me feel. So I don't, I keep I live a simple life. Yeah. And I'm fine with that. And if someone's listening to this and are not fine with it, cool.
Yeah.
No problem. But you're not going to be in my world.
Well, dude, thank you so much for giving me the invitation. I'm very happy.
Pleasure, man. You earned it.
Yeah. And those small moments into big moments. Like, I know for you, just by working with you and getting to know you, like, if I show up with a Dunkin' Donuts coffee, like, we're good. I'm like, okay, I'm in the door. Gagz, this has been a great invitation. Great invitation, great conversation.
Thank you. The pleasure has been mine, Aaron.
You and we lead with such earnestness, you know, with our community and even with ourselves, and grace and love and compassion with ourselves, but also very fearless. And, you know, a little Josh from Swagger House, he's like a humble rock star. You know, he uses that term a lot, but being a humble rock star at the same time, like knowing your worth, you know, and at the same time being able to detach from it just a tiny bit, you know. Like, for me, I don't lead with like accomplishments. I don't lead with like a title of like what I've, you know, as long as I'm comfortable with myself, am I living a true life that is true to me?
I tell my sons all the time, like, if you're doing something great, keep your mouth shut, because if it's really great, people are going to do the talking for you.
Oh yeah, exactly.
They'll let you know. Yeah. Good or bad, for that
good or bad. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, like, do you want to tune in to the good? Do you want to tune into the bad? You know, I'd rather tune into the good, you know, so being very intentional too, and weeding out the rest of it. Last question, dude. What's on the horizon for you? Like, what's next for Gagz? Is there anything that you want to plug in or kind of like announce or?
I mean, my race schedule this season, I just did a 48-hour track race 2 weeks ago. Didn't go as well as I wanted it to, but I managed to eke out a spot on the podium and learn a lot. My next race is going to be a 24-hour track race, Mother's Day weekend. Then I have the Loopy Looper 24-hour race, the first Saturday of August. I'm looking to take down Paul Johnson's course record.
Here's looking at you, Paul.
And going back out to Javelina for my 4th consecutive Javelina. That's my race schedule. And of course, the Philly Marathon, working with Ansley's Angels again this November. That's my race schedule. Coaching, hit me up. My Instagram, BDG123. You have any questions, hit me up. Let's talk. Let's see if we're a good fit for one another. And what I'm really excited about, Aaron, is I had some folks follow me around for about a year, do a documentary on my time on the bridge and some of the things that we talked about today, some of the decisions I had made in my life. We're working on that right now. It's almost done. I'm letting these guys at Rocket Fuel Studios, Alden Roth and Davis Knoxville, to do their thing. I believe it's going to be titled To Be the Man. And when it comes out, it's going to be pretty cool, pretty wild, pretty surreal. I have a little bit of anxiety about that. I'm kind of like a little weird to promote yourself in that manner. But I also believe in myself. I believe in the work that they've put in. I have seen a couple clips. It looks pretty cool. And I'm taking myself out of it and giving that thing. So I say all this, a very circuitous way of saying it's coming out at some point in time. Don't know when, where, just yet. It'll be sooner than later. We are kicking it out to a bunch of festivals as well. And there will be a release party in this area. That's for certain. But we'll work those things out.
Yeah, dude, some very exciting things on the horizon. Sharing the film with me. I cried,
oh, come on.
No, I totally did. I cry on everything, dude. Like, I literally was watching Toy Story 1 to 4 with my grandmother the other day, and like I was in the corner crying while she's like on her little chair. She's like, "Aaron, are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine," and I'm crying at like Woody being left.
Oh, man.
So I'm very much like someone who would cry on anything, but it has to hit the heart. It has to hit me, and yours did, dude. And that's why, you allow me to show up every single day as myself, and just who you are for your community. This conversations that we have had, not just this one, but over time. I'm thinking back to the very first podcast conversation we had on Running Times, your podcast, and now, and just us communicating, you can see so much growth. Like hearing you talk, so much growth.
You too, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. So once again, Gagz, just thank you so much for this conversation. I cannot wait for everyone in our community to hear this.
It's funny, Aaron, because you're no longer like a young lion in my eyes now.
Oh,
like now you're a full-grown lion.
Yeah,
ready to take on the world. And I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate our bond. Yeah. This was nice. This was a very nice Sunday afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation into my life and also being a part of my chosen family. And I cannot wait for this film to be released. It's going to be epic.
Thank you.
Don't forget, you have to, announce it as the Gagz Gala so people can show with the red carpet.
Let's just say when it comes out, we're going to have a little release party and,
Yeah, there's going to be photographers in a red carpet. Okay, Gagz, thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Peace and love.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to another fantastic and wonderful episode of A Squared Conversation. If you like this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, be square and have a great day.